already. Hey, everybody, welcome back to episode 2 of the Jack Cohen podcast. Today, I'm joined with very special guest of WBAL Radio and 98 Rock, Valerie Preactor. So, Valerie, do you want to introduce yourself to some people who might not know who you are?
Sure. Yeah. So I am the morning sports anchor, like you said, for both of those stations. So we get up and start our day very, very early in the morning while everyone else is still sleeping. If there's any breaking news overnight or early in the morning, we've got you covered. And so we go live at 5 a.m. and we cover the Orioles and the Ravens. We're the flagship station for both of those teams, WBAL and 98 Rock. We also have Navy football as well on WBAL, but it has been so fun. I've been there for 2 years already now, which is crazy. And we're having so much fun covering these teams. And luckily, they're really doing great so far. So that also makes everything easier. And we're getting so excited for the Ravens season to kick off in literally just a week. So counting down the days, I can't believe summer's already basically gone. So I've been really enjoying what I've been doing for these teams and looking forward to getting another postseason with the Orioles, which is crazy.
Yeah, well, before we hop into some Ravens and Orioles, obviously news just broke about 10 minutes before we hopped on the air. Today is Thursday, August 29th. Sorry, I almost said August 28th, about Brandon Aiyuk, who's obviously been in talks with the Steelers, Patriots. Well, the Niners have extended him to a 4-year, $120 million and $76 million in guarantee. What was your initial reaction when you saw that? Did you think he was going to be traded? And if so, which team?
Honestly, I felt like from the beginning when Brandon Aiyuk had said that he wanted the trade, he had asked for it.
Yeah.
And the 49ers immediately were like, no. Then it was kind of just a roller coaster. Like, then they're like, okay, maybe we're open to it. Obviously, contract negotiations not going well throughout the offseason. And it really just felt like there may just not be a deal that could get done before week 1. And I know that he was linked to a bunch of other teams around the league. I never really thought too much of that because he is such a cemented weapon on that team for Brock Purdy alongside George Kittle. I mean, the 49ers are so stacked, and they are one of my favorite teams to watch just because of how explosive their offense is. So I think without Brandon Aiyuk, it would look completely different. And I know they have Deebo Samuel, and so they all have the same skill set. But Brandon Aiyuk obviously has been there for a long time, and I think that deep in my mind, I was like, I think he's probably just going to stay. And that's not to mean that he was settling. Again, he's one of the highest paid wide receivers, like $120 million.
Yeah.
It sounds like it worked out. But I think initially, the 49ers weren't willing to dish that out. And then they realized, they still went to the Super Bowl last year. So
Yeah.
for them to get back there, they're going to have to pay for it. And they did.
Yeah, and Deebo Samuel, obviously, they're working him as kind of a jet sweep guy, bring him in motion. So Aiyuk and Kittle are really your big targets. Yes, you still have Samuel, but he's more for speed. And Aiyuk and
Mhm.
Kittle can get open with their route running skills. Obviously, Kittle you can probably debate that he's leaving the peak time of his career. And
Yeah, I agree with you there. But I also think like Deebo Samuel is way more versatile than
yes.
anybody thinks. Like he's throwing
Mhm.
touchdown passes. He is
Yeah.
so incredible to watch. It's completely electric. His personality is out there. But for me, Deebo, and he's a little injury prone, which makes me
Yeah.
nervous. So I always feel like it's something. And whether he's still playing through it and he's not 100%, he's still productive. And so I do think that Brandon Aiyuk, they kind of feed off of each other. And you're right,
Yeah.
they're in different positions in just their need for the team. But I mean, that again, the 49ers are stacked. They are.
Well, let's go into a team with another really good wide receiver tight end duo in the Ravens with Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews. Obviously, the 53-man roster came out a couple days ago. What were your surprises or takeaways from that being released? Obviously, two rookie safeties or young safeties getting on the roster, and Sanusi Kane and UDFA out of University of Maryland, go Terps, Bo Braid.
Mm-hmm. So initially, when the 53-man roster came out, a lot of time there's not really many surprises.
Yeah.
And the last 20-ish years, we've known that the Ravens do like to select at least one undrafted free agent rookie. So out of the 21 last seasons, like they've had one. And those guys have been so special to this team. You look at a guy like Justin Tucker or Zach Orr, who is now the defensive coordinator, or Patrick Ricard, who has been an incredible addition to the Ravens organization. So for Beau Brade to get that opportunity, a hometown kid, literally grew up playing, Pop Warner football for the Ravens. And now he's actually on the Baltimore Ravens. He was a team captain at Maryland, led the team in tackles the last 2 years. Like, he proved his worth and completely deserved that spot on the 53. He is so physical, and he just has those football instincts that I think really stand out and makes you think he plays like a Raven. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Sanusi Kane, I loved watching week 1 of preseason. I thought he's so speedy. The agility is there. Again, just football smarts. Like, he was making good plays, and he did get a little tripped up and got injured for a second, which again makes me worry. But the Ravens let Geno Stone walk, who was incredible last year. So they needed 1 or 2 guys to replace him, and that's exactly what they did with Sanusi Kane and Beau Brade. 6 safeties on the Ravens roster. I think that's surprising. But the other side of the coin is, for me, I was really looking at the offensive line, because that is so huge. The fact that they completely upheld that, let a lot of guys go in free agency, and we're only returning Ronnie Stanley and Tyler Linderbaum.
Yeah.
It's a young offensive line, 10 offensive linemen, and I would say a handful of them are under 25, which, is that great? Yes, because then they might have a little bit more durability when you look at like a guy who is now 100%, and Andrew Voorhees. Hopefully he's not injury prone after the torn ACL. But in speaking to him and Roger Rosengarten, like, these guys are hungry to play in the NFL. They are so beyond ready. And so I think to be learning from Tyler Linderbaum, who is like a Pro Bowler, like,
Yeah.
he is a great leader, and Ronnie Stanley, who's been there for a while. Again, you talk about durability, hopefully with Ronnie Stanley. I mean, that's always something like in the back of our minds to think about, but I think it's good to have a young squad. Yes, the inexperience is going to be there, and it's going to really show week 1 when you're going against Chris Jones and the Chiefs. That is a stout defensive line. So immediately it's a test. So I'm going to be interested to see who is going to earn all the starting jobs now that the 53 man is secured. But those were the biggest takeaways for me.
Yeah, and I think giving my takeaways here now, um, like you said, the offensive line, you let many guys go. And you still have Patrick McCarry, who and Ben Cleveland, who over the years have been your Ronnie Stanley's hurt, put him in, or even last year, Kevin Zietler's hurt, put him in there, or Morgan Moses is hurt, put them in there. But they also added another guy who reminds me a lot of Patrick McCarry. He's a really good backup. Josh Jones. I believe he can play left tackle and right tackle. So I know it was for right tackle, it was between Josh Jones and Roger Rosengarten, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. And obviously Roger Rosengarten, I believed was going to win it because I mean, he was a mid mid draft pick, but I mean his talent was there. I believe he set some record at Washington for not allowing sacks. And when you get a guy like that in the mid rounds, like the Ravens did, how do you not start him? And going on to the defensive backs, you got TJ Tampa, a rookie, Beau Brade, a
Mm,
rookie, Sanusi Kane is a rookie too, I believe.
yeah.
Yeah. And then you've also got Trenton Simpson. I know going to the linebackers, it's like you let 2 stars go, Geno Smith and Patrick Queen to division rivals, but you replaced them pretty well. Trenton Simpson,
Yeah.
him and Roquan are going to be scary this year. Um, and then Geno Stone, you've replaced with Beau Brade, Sanusi Kane. TJ Tampa can do corner and safety, I believe. I think they like his versatility there too.
And remember, Geno Stone was also one of those guys who was, I don't remember, either a late draft pick or the
Yeah.
Ravens ended up cutting him, and he was like kind of bounced around for a second, came back to the Ravens. So again, there's a lot that the Ravens defensive coaches can develop out of these young guys. And I think that really is their plan, especially now with Zach Orr at the defensive coordinator position, because him going from an undrafted free agent rookie to a player, having football being taken away from him, leaving the game so young, and now getting into coaching, he is just going to connect with those players on such a deeper level, and it's going to motivate them. And that was one of the things that we noticed so early on in the preseason, was that Zach Orr down on the sidelines is so fired up. He is so excited. The energy is so high. And so for him to be calling the plays, and Trenton Simpson had the green dot helmet throughout
Yeah.
preseason. And it's like, he's up in my head, like screaming, and I have to relay that to the rest of the players. So you know that's going to fire up Roquan Smith because he's probably going to have the green dot during the season. But now that Trenton Simpson also knows what's going on in there, they're going to just be like so in line with each other. And in talking with Trenton Simpson, he's ready for this role. I mean, Patrick Queen did so much
Yeah.
for the secondary, not the secondary, but for the defense when Roquan Smith came into the mix. And again, everyone plays better when Roquan Smith is there and he is the leader. So for everyone to learn from him, I think that's just what makes this defense tick because he's the catalyst. And so as long as Roquan Smith is involved, everybody else is going to be fine.
Yeah, and touching on what we were talking about earlier about injury prone in Deebo Samuel, the health of this Ravens team worries me. Rashad Bateman on the offensive side, Marlon Humphrey on the defensive side, and throw in the offensive line, Ronnie Stanley too. And you don't know about Andrew Voorhees, obviously coming off the torn ACL, as you said. But this team's three vets that they rely on, Humphrey, Humphrey and
Now,
Stanley are very injury prone, and Bateman.
see, I don't know if I agree with you on the Marlon Humphrey thing. I do think that little things have come into
True.
play the last couple of years,
Yeah.
but it's never been like a
Major.
major injury. Ronnie Stanley is the exception. I do agree with you on that. I feel like because he's just never been 100% since that ankle
No.
injury.
No.
So I think that is the problem. Like Marlon Humphrey will get back to 100%,
Yeah.
but then in talking with all the players in the locker room throughout the season, everybody's got
Hurt.
something. And
Right.
even if it's not reported, guys are struggling. Like this is so hard, especially because the off season is so long now.
Yeah.
And there's just so much work to be done and they have a hard schedule. So these guys are going to be battered and bruised by like week 6. And so they just have to, we talk about all the time, the difference to John Harbaugh about a player being hurt and a player being injured. I think Marlon Humphrey falls a lot in the category of being hurt
Injured.
a lot.
Or injured. Yeah.
So I think he's hurt, but he can still play. Like
Right.
he's okay. But also they do err on the side of caution with a lot of these guys because they don't want somebody that's hurt to then get injured, which is worse.
Right.
So I understand your perspective, but like, and we'll get into this later, I'm sure, but like the talk about injuries, like the Orioles are going through it. So
Yes.
they're not on the level of injury prone people that the Ravens are yet. So I think, the Ravens are pretty much starting out the season strong. And I will say that, as long as Lamar Jackson stays healthy, as long as Mark Andrews stays healthy, which they didn't even have him last year for quite a bit. So everybody else comes into play and they pick up the slack. The depth is there, next man up mentality all the time. It happens in every single sport. So it's kind of something you can't avoid. But yeah, it is, you kind of see that coming and hope that it doesn't.
Yeah, and like you just said, let's hop into some Orioles baseball before we close this thing out. Obviously, when we're filming Thursday, August 29th, the O's are looking for a series win tonight against the Dodgers. They lost 6-4 last night. Only one of the 6 runs the O's allowed last night were earned. There were 3 defensive errors, and Corbin Burns only allowed the one. So if you look at his stat line, it's 1 earned run and 6 runs, and the 3 errors coming from Gunnar Henderson, Ramon Arias, and James McCann. Henderson picking up his 20th, Arias' 6th, and McCann his 7th error. And really, Gunnar, his fielding has not been great this year, but Ramon Arias just keeping that tear going again, man. 2 RBIs again last night and a double.
Look, it's good to see Ramon back on his offense. The defense for him, though, has been an issue. I feel like I've seen again.
Yeah.
He's a gold glove third baseman. We have not seen that this
No.
year at all, which is surprising to me because Ramon is like he's kind of a workhorse. Like you put him out there, he's ready to go. And so to see a couple of errors throughout the season, not even just recently, it's been interesting to kind of break that down.
Yeah.
Gunnar Anderson, I get upset about him sometimes because he's a ball hawk and he is a golden retriever. He
Yes.
follows the ball wherever it goes. But I think that he needs to like calm it down a little bit sometimes and just get back to fundamentals. Looking at the numbers, though, you're right. When you say, okay, Gunnar Henderson playing at shortstop, it's his first full year
Here.
shortstop. This is like he's getting no rest. He's not getting days off a lot. Like he is grinding. So 20 errors in the grand scheme of things really isn't that bad. And I'll tell you why. I looked up the stat this morning. So Cal Ripken Jr., when he played, I believe it was 1983, when the Orioles won the World Series the last time, he's in his rookie year, his first full season, 162 games at shortstop. He made 25 errors. Gunnar
Yeah.
Henderson's on the same path. So I do think that it's okay. Cal Ripken Jr., the next 2 seasons, all full seasons at shortstop, 26 errors each. The only time that he had his best fielding year at shortstop was when he was 29 years old in 1990, and he only had 3 errors. So again, Gunnar Henderson's 23 years old.
Mhm.
He's the rookie of the year last year. He's gonna learn how to continue to progress his game and work out the kinks. Brandon Hyde's not worried. I know that the fans are because that's just uncharacteristic. We see how many incredible plays Gunnar makes on a regular basis. So when he does miss one, it's shocking.
Yeah.
And when he misses multiple, it's even more shocking. So it's, to me, we haven't seen the real Orioles the last
No.
month or so, I will say. And I know Brandon Hyde has even said, like, the first 2 months of the season, April, May, I would even say June, like, there were some really, those were the Orioles. Those were the strong
Yes.
games that we saw. Everything was clicking on all cylinders. They've been hit with so many injuries, as we mentioned
Yeah.
before. That's what's been the most devastating part, really.
Mhm. Yeah, and obviously, like you said, Rookie of the Year, Colton Cowser, an AL frontrunner. But I do want to talk about errors while I have the stat pulled up a second.
Yeah.
Gunnar Henderson has almost triple the errors that the next guy on the Orioles would have. That is James McCann and Jordan Westberg tied for 7. But if you look at the rest of the infield, Westberg has 7, Arias has 6, so that's 13. Mateo had 4, that's 17. We're not really counting first base. Holiday had 2, so that's 19. And then Kobe Mayo, 1, makes 20. So Gunnar Henderson has the same amount as all the rest of the infield combined.
But you have to look when you're looking at those numbers, and that's a great point. But none of those players play full time like Gunnar Henderson.
True. Good point.
So I'm just saying, like, you get
Yeah.
to the year and you see how many over 100 games. I would say probably over 140 games that
Right.
Gunner's playing at shortstop. And even when Jordan Westberg was a regular, he and Ramon Arias were still kind of
Platooning.
platoon a little bit. So, and it's the same thing this year, when we've seen with Ryan Mountcastle and Ryan O'Hearn at first base, which to me, in years past, before Ryan O'Hearn was here, it was Ryan Mountcastle at first base all day. Like
Yeah.
you don't need anybody else. But now Ryan Mountcastle is dealing with a little bit of an injury, so you do need the backup. And just to talk about injuries for a second,
Mhm.
because we got the news about Jorge Mateo yesterday.
Yes. Out for the
That's
year.
an incredible blow for the Orioles, which again, that happened on a play in the infield colliding with Gunnar Henderson.
Henderson.
A tough play. And I don't know if there were talks about that. Obviously it's an accident, but
Yep.
it's a very costly accident for this team. Jorge Mateo's skill sets are so different. They're so unique from anybody else on the team or maybe even in this league. The speed on the bases that he has, his offense was just starting to get there. Remember, like his
Mhm.
defense is also good. He makes the occasional like overthrow, but again, he was a great spot
Yes.
for filling for Gunnar Henderson if need be, or at second. So I think without him for the rest of the year and probably a part of next season
Next year.
too, depending on how the recovery and the rehab goes on, it's Tommy John surgery. Like
Yeah.
that's a serious elbow surgery that now, 4 Orioles have gone through. So that's a big deal.
And one last thing before we wrap it up, actually, too, combined into one, the pitching. Corbin Burns, last few starts, ever since the All-Star break, he's not looked great. And is it too early to say, does Drew French, like, what's going on with Drew French? Because obviously the pitching injuries, is it something with his routines? Could it be the athletic training staff? But, like, Corbin Burns struggling, I know that's probably a him problem, but the injuries, who, I don't want to say at fault, but who could work with the rest of the pitching staff who actually have their arms intact to stay like that.
Yeah, and it's a good perspective, but also you look around the league and
True.
I know that the Orioles, their rotation has taken probably the biggest hit of any other team, but every team has, I will say confidently, I don't even know really for sure, but I would say almost every team has one player on the injured list of one pitcher that has elbow or shoulder issue.
For
And
sure.
I think that's just the way the game is right now. And I've had
Mhm.
conversations with former players. I was talking with Brad Brock and the Orioles pitcher, who's a submariner, Darren O'Day. They're
Mhm.
talking about the velocity. Everybody's chasing velocity. That's what's killing your arm.
Yep.
And back in the day when it was not about velocity and it was about placement, it was about command, it was more shoulder than it was elbow. And so the fact that
Yeah.
it's now all elbow injuries seems like it's one specific problem. It's a great point that you brought up the athletic trainers or if it's, the pitching coaches. I don't necessarily think so, but that you could throw that into the list of it's a
Good.
combination of everything. So, and again, I've talked to Drew French. I think he's a wonderful pitching coach. He really
Yeah.
does care about the guys. He cares about the human beings that they are, not necessarily the
Mhm.
numbers that they're producing. And so I do think that he's been incredibly helpful in making sure that, it was interesting because you bring up last night's game and they were saying that Corbin Burns was like not using his cutter as much, which we know
No.
that's one of his favorite pitches.
Right.
So last night's game was such an anomaly for me. Corbin Burns losing 3 straight games. He's never done that before in his career.
No.
He definitely is going through something because, as soon as the haircut goes, you're like, okay, something's happening, something needs to change, but nothing did. And again, I don't want to say that last night was his fault, but
No.
it felt like he just couldn't get an out. And not
Right.
that that was again not his fault. The defense
Nope.
wasn't A1, but he does give up probably
Hits.
a home run every game. A
Yeah.
home
And
run.
home run.
I mean,
Yeah.
and if you look at his August stats, which are also crazy to me, in the month of August, what's that? 4 starts. He's given up 28 runs. That is so many in the grand scheme of thing in 1 month. And again, Corbin Burns has never had a scoreless outing this year for the Orioles. But that's not meaning to say that he's not been a good pitcher. He's been their ace.
Yeah.
Just as of recently, he hasn't looked like it. And
Right.
I don't know what's going to get him out of that funk, but Brandon Hyde has said this even when Craig Kimbrell was going through issues. It's not going to help him to not pitch. You
Right.
have to still time.
Mhm.
So it's the process that Corbin Burns really prides himself on, his 5-day in between process. So it's got to be something in there. Obviously, he's had a lot of family things going on. He and
Yeah.
his wife welcomed twins right before the All-Star break. So a lot's going on.
Right.
But it would have been better if, Zach Eflin comes in, wins 4 straight, and had kept going on that. But now that Zach Eflin's on the injured list, that puts a lot more pressure on
On Corbin.
Kramer, Corbin Burns, Albert Suarez, like Cole Irvin, all the guys that are stepping in now to be the one, just the one, pitcher at the time who can get a win. So I do think that there's so much pressure on this rotation. And when you look at coming up in a couple days, the roster is going to expand for the start of September. I don't even know that they have other pitchers to
Bring
add.
up.
Right. So I think you're
Eflin.
going to, but I think it's going to be interesting to see if they choose position players or pitchers or maybe both, or I'm not sure. We'll find out in a couple of days. But, normally we would see some September call-ups like we saw with Gunnar Henderson 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe Kobe Mayo will come back. I mean, I think it just depends on exactly what they need. And maybe they need Kobe Mayo to come back in the infield. Who knows? But there's a lot of unanswered questions for the Orioles. I think we're
Mhm.
starting to get in that panic mode here at the end of August. But the good news is they're not, maybe they haven't peaked yet.
Yeah.
Even the first 2 months of the season, we thought that was really great Orioles baseball. Maybe there's still more to come. They just need something. So we'll
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah. And like you said, September call ups. This would be a perfect time to call up Connor Norby or Kyle Stowers, but they're raking
They're
it
going.
out down south in Miami. But
Yeah.
here's another guy you got to remember. What do you do with Heston Kjerstad when he gets back? Because technically, he's on the Major League IL because of his an
Yeah.
injury that happened in MLB. I talked about this on my last podcast. It happened in the MLB, but he was in AAA, but I don't think he'd played a game, and it was retroactive to when he was still in the bigs. So will they keep him? Will they send him down? And also Zach Eflin, because you expand the roster to 28. Right now you've got 26. Eflin coming back and not sending anybody down would be 27, and then you can call up Kobe Mayo maybe. But also
Right.
you've got Emmanuel Rivera. Do you need Kobe Mayo at this point? So there's going to be a lot of questions answered, and I'm sure the moves are still going to leave some questions when September 1st rolls around in a couple days.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting.
No doubt. I mean, there's still hopefully so much more to come for this Orioles team here in 2024. Obviously, they are still in such a dead heat race with the Yankees right now, and I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. Hopefully, they can get some separation at some point. But again, this is the exciting part about baseball. September is going to be incredible. And for as many homestands as there are, get out to the ballpark. I always tell people Camden Yards, it's a fun place to be when they're winning. And we saw them do that last weekend with two great games, two very memorable games. So hopefully they can get back to the winning ways that like we know they can. And I'm thinking that this team is more resilient than we think
Yes.
because we
Mm-hmm.
do know a little bit better now after last season. And I know that the injuries have completely, worked against them, but look how they're still winning. Like again, it's kind of this year's like an anomaly in the league. Like nobody's playing incredible. Everyone's just playing
No.
like kind of average baseball. So as long as the Orioles are like a hair above average, they're great.
Right. And obviously, this podcast is going to be out after September 1st. So obviously, we'll know before this goes out. So these were our predictions. I'm going with Kobe Mayo and Zach Eflin. I don't think they're going to send anybody down. I think they'll roll with the rotation they have now. Maybe even send Irvin into the bullpen. Rodriguez isn't ready yet to come back. So what are your final September call-up predictions?
No, I absolutely agree with you there. Because I do think that Cole Irvin, as solid as he's been, he's also been great in the bullpen,
Yes.
and they always need bullpen help. Like there's been a couple of
Mm-hmm.
games now where we're like, okay, the bullpen looks great, but then there's other games where it's a disaster. So he's a great, solid pitcher that you can go to no matter what. And again, he's an emergency guy. So if
Mm-hmm.
you need him in an emergency situation, he's there. Same thing with Albert Suarez. What a gem. Anybody else? I don't know that I would call up anybody else unless they're going to bring in somebody totally new from that
Yeah.
they picked up off of waivers or something like that. Which I do think that the Orioles could do again. I feel like Mike Elias always has his finger on the pulse of what's going on around the league. So if there is a way that they can get somebody on that will
Yeah.
really make a difference, they're going to go for it. So those
Yeah,
are my predictions.
obviously, O's just signed Nick Anderson to a minor league deal. Rock Kabako first reported that they were in a hurry to get him. So maybe, but I don't know. I think they just stick with Cole Irvin.
Yeah, good point. I'm with you, and I'm just looking forward to see, hopefully, when October rolls around, what what
Yeah.
the what the roster looks like.
Well, thank you for joining me today, Valerie. And I'm going to be starting to publish videos every Monday and Thursday, I hope. Could be altered, obviously, holidays, anything. So just I'll always post on my Instagram. So thanks to everybody for watching today. I'm Jack Cohen here with my guest Valerie Preactor. Have a great day, everybody. Go O's.
Thanks.